On here on this afternoon of June 23rd. It's a lovely fall day here in the Chicago area, particularly near Lake Michigan. And continuing our series of focusing on logistics in this I almost want to say post-pandemic period, but certainly what we've been experiencing here for the past almost year or more. Brett and I extended an invitation to Justin to see if he would convene a panel. Justin has had a career in transportation and logistics consulting. He's a friend and advisor to many people, and a very close personal friend of mine as a result of the BAC. He has been heavily involved in the Business Advisory Council through the Transportation Center at Northwestern, including being the chairman for a long period of time. And he has considerable knowledge and involvement in this industry. And with that, Justin, we'll turn the program over to you and ask you to introduce your panelists.
Thank you, Norm. It was very thoughtful. I owe you a beer at the Lantern now that we're allowed to get together. So thank you. There's been a lot of discussion over the years about whether the railroads really participate much in logistics. Of course, the same could have been said years ago about the trucking companies, steamship lines, and so forth. But I think in the recent history over the last 15 to 20 years, as logistics has become the center of focus in a lot of industries, some of whom didn't know they needed to pay attention to logistics, like what we see in healthcare, vaccine distribution, PPE distribution over the last 2 years for people that all of a sudden woke up and said, we have a major problem. At the same time, there have been a number of companies that have popped up in the nomenclature and in the business and are growing rapidly, whether they're called third-party logistics companies or 3PLs, or 4PLs that are more in a coordinating role, or freight brokers. It seems that the old basic transportation days are somewhat behind us, and everybody's looking to add value, add capability, add service, and so forth, and call themselves logistics companies. That's a far cry from where we began as transportation companies, where, for those who know the history, know that the regulatory scheme was all organized around modes in terms of trucking, rail, barge, ocean, air, air cargo, and so forth, which were all heavily regulated. But whenever you talked about transportation, you took a modal spin. I think these days it's changed quite a bit in terms of, yes, we still have modes. A lot of the walls have come down, but I think people tend to think more in terms of first mile, middle mile, and final mile in terms of how they think of logistics problems and how they think of transportation. Certainly the railroads have participated through history very heavily in the first mile in terms of delivering raw materials, delivering supplies to factories, plants, and so forth. Increasingly in the middle mile that went from those plants and factories to distribution centers and stores and the like. The rails have increased their participation and become a major player in that, and particularly in terms of not only boxcar, but in terms of intermodal service and so forth. And then some will argue that, certainly the intermodal people will argue that the rails are getting more attention in terms of part of the final mile, in terms of the delivery and so forth, but a lot of that is still the domain of trucks and package companies and the delivery companies. So we thought we'd give a couple of examples today of how the railroads are playing a growing and important role in the logistics space, and have two different flavors. First, we're going to hear from Josh Perks, who's Vice President and head of the Loop Logistics at Union Pacific, the second largest railroad in North America, the largest public railroad certainly in North America. 18 years with the UP across operations, HR, marketing, and sales. A graduate of Brigham Young and a graduate of, we shouldn't mention this, Josh, but you're graduates of that school on the other end of the lake at Chicago. So we'll start with him, and we'll be followed by Kimiya Katami, who's Director of Service and Commercial for the Pacific Harbor Line, part of the Anacostia Railway Group, oversees all their commercial railroad operations, all their commercial operations and planning. 6 years with the Anacostia, used to be with the Union Pacific. Matter of fact, we just learned that Josh brought her into the family way back when, and is planning to go to the Wright School on the lake, Northwestern Business School, at some point. So why don't we start with Josh, and Josh, take us through the UP's perspective on logistics and how you play in that game.
Excellent. Well, first, thank you for the opportunity. Great chance to talk with others and share kind of our story. And I love the topic. I think it's certainly relevant for today. Our customers and shippers are constantly looking for extended supply chain solutions. And this industry is continuing to evolve. Technology is continuing to grow. And so it's an exciting time to be talking about supply chain. I'll go through just a few brief slides and then save some time for Q&A at the end, but just have a couple slides that I'll share just to help kind of kick it off and level set a little bit more about Loop and a little bit more about Union Pacific. Hopefully everyone can see the slides okay. Excellent. Many of you are familiar with Union Pacific. I won't go through each of these, but we've had a long history of serving a large percentage of the U.S. market, as well as all of our international shipments, both north and south of us, Canada, Mexico, but also internationally across the globe. And we're very proud of our network. It's quite an extensive network in many of our fastest growing states and communities. And so we're thrilled to be part of that. And the role I play at Loop Logistics ultimately gives me opportunity to leverage the strength of this unique franchise in delivering value for our customers. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. At Loop, we're a wholly owned subsidiary of Union Pacific. We were actually 4 separate subsidiary companies up until 2017, and determined that there were some synergies that could be established, that we could provide better value to our customers if we merged those 4 into one. And so that's when Loop was formed. Actually, I happened to be on the commercial kind of branding and naming side of that. So anyone that doesn't love the name or the brand, I apologize. But it was a lot of fun to think about what kind of company we could create. And ultimately, kind of that tagline, solutions live here. The idea was we have a wonderful rail franchise, but many customers and shippers are not rail served, as you alluded to earlier, in those first and last mile. And so how do we create a subsidiary that really specializes in extending kind of that rail reach and give access to the economies, the efficiency, the more environmentally friendly solutions that rail offers? And so Loop was really formed to kind of create that. And we break into these 4 categories. Our carload is anything from steel, lumber, wind. We do a little bit of everything in that group, but warehousing, storage, and then other value-added services. And then we also have a lion's share of kind of the auto parts market. We ship just-in-time auto parts, both north and south, as well as east and west across the U.S. for all of the major automotive manufacturers that you would think of, including electric vehicle manufacturers. It's a fun industry. Unfortunately, the semiconductor shortages have been challenging for the entire industry this year, but we continue to support that business and help them grow, which is a lot of fun. Our wholesale side, think of this as non-auto parts intermodal. So this is anything from electronics, consumer goods, anything that needs to be shipped into various markets. We support those customers in getting from the rail ramps, the intermodal ramps, and then trucked into an actual distribution center or warehouse, a facility, whatever it may be. And we do quite a bit of volume there. And then our carrier relations, a lot of folks don't realize, but we use hundreds of different truck carriers to help facilitate all three of these kind of key areas. And in fact, just met with some of our carrier team from Mexico this morning, but we have an extensive carrier network, which is one of the strengths we bring in terms of lining up that truck capacity with that final mile or first mile. Just a few additional things. I've touched on a couple of these, but maybe a few just to point out. One of the things we really are experts at the cross-border, so the to and from Mexico, sometimes that can be a challenge for shippers that aren't familiar with shipping internationally. We've been doing that for years and are very, very good at it. That's something that we specialize in. We also specialize in giving visibility to shippers. Some shippers have had challenges where their product may ride on a vessel and then a railroad and then another railroad and then a truck, and they often don't have the visibility from kind of beginning to end. And that's something we can bring into the equation, which gives them that visibility for their shipments all the way through to final delivery. And as I mentioned, we can do anything from just-in-time service-sensitive type things to less service-sensitive storage type operations, but anything and everything. I continue to be amazed at the different types of solutions we were able to provide based on the needs of our customers. For example, the wind market, we were one of the first to get in fact, if not the first to get into the wind industry in terms of helping with transloads and some of the rail solutions in wind back in the early 2000s. And last year set just new records with our wind market. We're continuing to grow that business and support that business. But those are the types of solutions that we can bring. And when you're shipping something like a wind blade, which is over 200 feet long, that can be a challenge. And so we can come in and help support that, partnering with the railroad, as well as building what we call wind farms, where those wind projects can be put together. So a lot of cool markets. It's a lot of fun to be part of this side of the business. These are some additional areas that we support, but I think I've touched on most of these. But the key message is that as customers need to ship products from point A to point B, regardless of whether or not they're rail served at either end, Loop can come in and provide a solution that can help kind of bridge that gap. This gives you a little sense of our network. You saw the UP network. Our network is, of course, much larger since we use other railroads on the east, both in Canada, Mexico. We've got an extensive network. We have what we call rail ports, which you can think of those as rail serve facilities where we can transload, store, and do some other value-added services. And then we have other partners that we work with across our entire network to help create logistics solutions for our customers. So those are just a few brief slides to set it up. And I'll turn the time over to you or to Camilla to kind of continue, and then happy to answer any questions at the end.
Okay, thank you. I mean, that's really interesting. It's so far beyond basic rail transport and the steel wheel part. And I think what we'll do is we'll come back, Josh, after we hear from Camilla, to ask some questions. I have a few, and I'm sure the audience has a few. One might ask, after hearing Josh go through his presentation and talking about that large-scale, extensive, almost umbrella type capability that the Union Pacific is able to bring to its customers across the country, why have a short line railroad? The proposition is simple. If you, I just was reminded last year when I completed a project for a rail maintenance company that did track maintenance for transit agencies, for the large railroads, and for and short line railroads, but also did a lot of track maintenance, repair, and rebuilding for industrial companies. The people that had their own extensive on-property rail facility. Many had their own locomotives and equipment and so forth across a range of industries. And many of them were very concerned about short line railroads being, or light density lines being carved out. And they were very convincing in that many of their new partners at their facilities in entering this world where they don't have direct access to the main line of a railroad, that many of their partners and people they relied on were the short line railroads. That was their point of access. They became their solutions provider. They were the go-to people, not only for track and trace, but for problem solving, design, enhancement, and improvement. So that's why we have short lines here. They play an important role, not only in the rail sector, but in the evolving logistics sector that many people may not appreciate. So Camilla, why don't you give us a flavor for how you play in the logistics game?
Absolutely. And as I take myself off of mute, I should apologize in advance if you hear train horns in the background. Short lines are typically on the ground, so our offices do get quite a bit of noise. I'll go ahead and share my screen. Let's just make sure everyone can see it. All right, are we good?
Yep. You might want to blow it up a little bit.
That's right. One moment here. All right, are we okay?
We're good.
Awesome. So first of all, thank you so much for having us. I know there's a lot of work involved in coordinating this, but to Justin's point, there have been a lot of cultural transitions and shifts with regards to rail. And having Josh present on the loop side of things actually fits very well with the shortline model. And we actually partner with Loop closely across all of our different short lines. So I think there's a lot of synergy that's there. So, you know, really to start, our goal here is to present an overview of how the shortline industry has transitioned from being just a transportation provider to being a true business partner to our customers. So I'll start off with a brief company overview of Anacostia Rail Holdings and Pacific Harbor Line. And then I'll go into how short lines are able to build trust with these customers and bring them onto the rail network. And then I'll transition to our role in the greater supply chain, because I think folks are very interested in understanding how all of the pieces really come together and how all the partners work. And then lastly, discuss how those connections leave long-lasting impacts in the network and also create a lot of efficiencies as we go forward. A quick overview of Anacostia. The company was established in 1994. We own a total of 6 railroads and also recently acquired a transloading operation, a Precision Terminal Logistics. Our operation actually serves 3 of the largest US markets in Los Angeles, New York, and Chicago, with a lot of opportunity to grow within those existing markets. Collectively, our railroads have handled over 3.7 million units. That's both intermodal and carload combined, with Pacific Harbor Line handling the majority of that intermodal volume. And all in all, we have 390 railroad employees with 175 additional employees that work for Precision Terminal Logistics. So with Pacific Harbor Line, it's a fascinating story of how this railroad started and how much we've been able to expand over the past 22 years. But essentially, we were established in 1998. We're a neutral switch carrier for both Union Pacific and BNSF, serving the entire Port of Los Angeles and Port of Long Beach jointly. And part of the services that we provide are dispatching, maintenance, and switching services. You know, from an overall commodity standpoint, you name it, we touch it. So, you know, the intermodal is a very, very large part of our business. We directly serve the terminals inside and also work on behalf of UP and BNSF, providing dock jobs. And we also have over 25 carload customers. So very diverse traffic mix, and it's something that has really protected our franchise over the ups and downs of the economy throughout the years. Something that we're really excited about, we can't help but share, is that we are working towards developing and testing the very first fully electric, battery electric, zero emission switching locomotive. And PHL has always been on the forefront of the environmental progress, specifically because of where we're located in California, being a high visibility and highly sensitive area. But it's something that we think short lines have been able to demonstrate very well across the industry, is being that willing party to test, to invest, and also to grow towards efficiencies. So, you know, really it starts with the granular customer. Putting the trust in the railroad is a very big challenge. Something that I learned at Union Pacific, and I think Josh will agree, is a railroad customer never forgets. So it's difficult to be able to, if you lose a customer, bring them back, but also to onboard a customer that has never experienced shipping by rail before. And short lines are always, if not always, most often, the very first point of contact for a shipper that's looking to grow their supply chain solution or improve it. So we actually have the unique ability to shape their perspective and leave this impact on them, and use our expertise to offer them a solution. Whether that's, you know, growing into a new market, it's competing with existing products, or just simply saving on their operational cost. We're there every step of the way with them. We have a very you know, high tenured staff, which allows us to have real expertise in the territory and our service capabilities. So for example, I mentioned, you know, in the very beginning, our offices at short lines are where the, you know, they're located where our territory is. So, you know, we're out there every day with the customers, we're driving these routes. We're very familiar with what our operation can handle and what we're capable of. So that initial conversation with the customer allows them to know, hey, if I do trust this railroad with my business, we know that at least they are confident in their capabilities. And I mentioned the tenured staff. Well, that's not just with our local operation, it's also you know, within the communities. So we have very strong networks, and also, you know, the class ones have that presence here locally as well that we work with, you know, and conjoin those efforts to be able to bring on this business and overcome the hurdles that, especially in California, we face in bringing on additional railcar business. So the short line industry's role in the greater supply chain, Pacific Harbor, I'm going to touch on Pacific Harbor Line because that's you know, been my expertise over the past 6 years. Sometimes we're the invisible partner, and we're okay with that. Customers may look at their route and see you know, just a class one railroad move. But once they really start to dig into, you know, who's handling it on the origin side, they realize that the short line plays a very big role in being able to successfully coordinate those movements. So we use basically, you know, our knowledge of the market, the service product, and also those relationships to make that a success all the way. We also invest heavily in our class one local and headquarters relationships. So when we do have a customer or an opportunity that needs a little bit more visibility, we leverage that and we bring it to the attention of folks who need to be aware of it. Many times, those small opportunities have actually resulted in huge projects that we've been able to onboard with the support of the class one railroads. Our goal, and Josh touched on it quite a bit, is we are a solution provider. We don't build barriers. So, you know, when a customer comes to a short line, you know, they can present an idea and we will always listen to them because no business is too small for a short line. For the most part, across the United States, we are still run like, you know, small businesses. And so we understand the importance of, you know, a small company trying to grow with us because together we'll be able to grow their business. And also the investment in technology, right? So railroads, you know, get a bad rep for being a little bit behind the curve on the implementation of technology. We've recognized as short lines and as an industry as a whole that customers need reliance and they need visibility. So, and of course, safety and efficiency all play a role in that. So, you know, Anacostia has invested significantly in both the railroad, our locomotive fleet, as well as the electronic technology to be able to offer those solutions to customers. We've seen a very, very positive outcome as a result of that. So lastly, touching on that lasting influence in the industry, when you onboard a customer, how are you impacting them to make sure that, we don't lose this customer 10 years down the line or impact them negatively? We always want them to have a positive experience with us. So what we do is we invest alongside them. We let them know that if there is a barrier to bringing you on board, let us know what it is. We'll come up with creative solutions for that. One very good example of that is the iron ore unit trains that we partnered with Union Pacific on. This was a business that was very, very challenging to onboard. And there were a lot of steps that we needed to take in order to make sure all parties were able to succinctly work together. And ultimately, the end destination was Pacific Harbor Line. There were a lot of proposals made throughout the years to be able to handle this business. However, because of the lack of space and infrastructure locally at the customer's facility, it was always kind of viewed as an opportunity that was either down the line or not possible, not feasible. And simply by bringing all the right folks to the table, we were actually able to make this a huge success. And when the market was strong enough from a pricing standpoint, the mine in Utah was able to begin operations again. And today what we handle is very different than what we handled in 2014, the last time that we handled unit trains. So we're constantly evolving. We're constantly, bringing on new folks, whether that means improving, our turn times, whether it means working with the customer to understand what the delays are in the network. We are there every step of the way with the customer. And because those relationships are strong, all parties feel at ease that, the short line is there, alongside them, because their success means our success ultimately. So, these ultimately result in long-lasting business relationships, and we're really proud of how far the short line industry's come as a whole. Of course, there's a lot of room for improvement, but I think we're taking all the right steps, as we go day by day to ensure that everyone understands the importance of the role that short lines play. This webinar is a very good example of that. Just simply being able to educate the audience about what each entity does and the impact that they can have, whether that's taking trucks off the road, creating environmental efficiencies, growing business, growing imports and exports. There are so many ways that we can add value as an entire supply chain. So anyhow, that's what I have. And this is a slide that just shows all of our holding companies, as well as our all of our railroads, as well as our transload operation, Precision Terminal Logistics. And with that, I will turn it over to Justin for the Q&A.
Thank you. I don't know which one of you to thank, but tell your dispatch that train coming through right on the half hour was perfect. So
perfect timing.
Right. So, Josh, let me start with you. In the past, and Union Pacific certainly was, I don't want to say guilty of this, but it was part of your strategy. A lot of some of the railroads felt they had to purchase assets to participate in the broader transportation market. You purchased overnight transportation years and years and years ago. Other railroads have purchased trucking companies, terminal companies, and so forth. And most recently, CSX purchased quality carriers and so forth. Do you think the pendulum is swinging where additional assets are going to be required to be a leader in this logistics phase, or has things changed enough where non-assets can really be the play, and it's more through talent and solutions and technology that the expanded reach begins?
That's an awesome question. In my mind, it's a little bit of everything, right? At the core, if you really sort of boil down the question, the core question is really, what is the most efficient way and the most value-added way a customer can get their products from A to B, right? At the end of the day, however that happens, as long as it works, it works. And so what we've found is that in many cases, if you have an excellent partnership with as Camilla indicated, a shortline or a trucking company or a storage operator, if that's working well, then that, in my mind, that supply chain solution can be very, very sufficient as well as effective for the customer base. If there are areas where that's not working for whatever reason, then having those assets could be an advantage. So in our world, Union Pacific owns a tremendous number of boxes of containers, and that's proven to be helpful. That gives us ability to meet the demands of our customers, to grow with them as we can. Not to say that's always works perfectly, right? I mean, this year has been a challenging year for us, and certainly for the entire industry. But having those assets can be helpful when there's capacity fluctuations and customers need that. But I'm not of the opinion that it has to be one or the other. In my mind, I would kind of break it down on what does the market need? What are they trying to accomplish? And can you create that? We're seeing actually tremendous synergies simply in getting smarter about how we connect technology. So you've probably heard of API, but that ability to take kind of one system and then proactively sort of link up the data sources with another system so that customers now can start actually monitoring their shipments in their own TMS, their own transportation management system, and pull in API data from a railroad, from a trucking company, and it can all be in one place. So to me, the customers are looking for that supply chain visibility, simplicity. It's got to be easy. And if you can create that solution by combining pieces of the equation, fantastic. In other cases, maybe it does make sense to acquire assets to be able to offer that full suite of products. But I don't think it's all or nothing. At least that's my perspective.
Thank you. Camilla, almost the same question in terms of, you mentioned in your presentation the tremendous investment you've made in technology. I assume that's not all for operating purposes, and a good bit of it is customer facing. Can you pick up where Josh left off and say how you use technology to interface with your customers and partners to grow?
Yeah, absolutely. So we use a web tech suite of products to offer, track and trace visibility, inbound, outbound shipments, and also billing services. So that's always been kind of something that we offer the customers when they are onboarded. It's part of that package. We've also invested heavily in locomotive technology to be able for safety measures and for efficiencies. We've also recently invested in bringing all of our company vehicles up to spec with the Samsara technology. And again, all of it is in an effort to be able to provide an overall better product for that end user, for that customer. If we are being more efficient in the way that we operate, ultimately it translates back to that customer. If our train masters are idling less in their cars, they're saving fuel, all of these cost savings will ultimately provide value back to that customer. And also it's more than just the immediate utilization for the end user. It's also the way that the port and the environment that we operate in views Pacific Harbor Line, right? So we're always being viewed as, okay, a company that is very invested in improvement all around, whether that's environmental or it's technological. We've also had access to the GE Port Optimizer project. And on the intermodal side, we don't have quite a bit of visibility on inbound intermodal containers as much as the Class 1s do. And the Port Optimizer actually allowed us to, without being a party to that bill, still understand what the fluctuations are. And we are able to react according to that data, whether that means investing more in our operations, whether it means ramping down, understanding where to assign our crews so that they're most efficient. There's definitely quite a bit of ways that they can be leveraged.
Brett, did you want to jump in here for a second, explain to the audience how we can connect?
Sure, Justin, and questions are coming in. So I sent this in the chat, but if you have a question, please use the Q&A feature in Zoom and type your question, and we will try to get to all questions depending, on how much time we have today.
So I'll read the first couple. And the first one is to Josh. It says, with the onset of PSR, the UP closed a number of intermodal operations, Global 3, for example, in Rochelle. With the challenges and the backups in Chicago, will the UP reopen closed intermodal yards? And there's probably a broader question in there too, Josh, about the impact of PSR on the kinds of services that you provide and what that means to a customer and going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me start with the second piece of that, and then I'll get specific to intermodal. You know, when you think of PSR, precision scheduled railroading, as it's often called, it's all about being efficient with your assets. It's about moving product very, very quickly. I spent 6 months in operations for Union Pacific last year, and so got to see it up close. Worked in North Platte, our largest rail yard, probably in the world, I believe, and had opportunity to kind of see that in action. But one of the challenges with a spread out system, you know, that's over 30,000 miles, is that any sort of bottleneck or any challenge in that supply chain, if not corrected, can create a ripple effect of challenges. And so PSR challenged some of the assumptions that the rail industry had made. You know, there used to be an assumption that when a car made it into a terminal, it would take, you know, up to a day or more to just classify and move into the next. And so some of the questions were, well, why can't we do it differently? Why can't we run longer trains? Why can't we be smarter about how we process those? And so it was effectively an opportunity to streamline and challenge some of those assumptions. Now, one of the things when we close, so now getting to your intermodal question, when we close a ramp or a facility, it is certainly not a decision that's made lightly, and most often it's never a permanent decision, right? So we may look at a market and determine that we have enough capacity to handle the volume that our customers need us to handle within a certain footprint, and we can do that efficiently. If not, or if the volumes change, we're always looking at those things. So to answer that question, if there's a surge in volume or we need more capacity, that's one of the advantages of having a network like we do, where we can grow and expand as needed. And so that's something I wouldn't call PSR necessarily kind of a perfect solution for every type of scenario. It helps you. It's more of a mindset and a way of thinking about how operating the railroad. It's proven to be very, very efficient, but we have to continually evaluate. It's never done, so to speak. You have to continually evaluate, do we have the capacity to handle the services our customers need us to handle? And if that means opening up a facility or changing the footprint of a facility, we are entertaining those conversations all the time.
Thank you. We have a question here that I'm going to throw to you, Camille. Tom wants to know, how has offering a broader suite of logistics and transloading services changed the pricing and service levels offered to direct serve rail customers? Is one part of the question. How has that changed your traditional pricing? Is it added on? Is it built in? How does it change? And then there's a related part of that. Has the addition of logistics services and so forth made some market segments more or less attractive? Has it improved penetration and success? Camille?
Absolutely. Those are two very good questions, and ones that I'm sure, especially as we transition, into offering, more a wider variety of services, customers will be interested in knowing. So I'll tackle the second question first, and the question was, have these additional service offerings made markets more or less attractive? I would say anytime that you're adding service offerings and flexibility, you will increase the interest and demand into that market. Los Angeles is widely viewed as a very congested and difficult to operate territory and environment. And when we are able to offer services to customers who don't have the rail infrastructure, you wouldn't believe what those business opportunities then present us. So, for example, we have a team track that is dually served UP and BNSF, which means that the customer can ship either railroad, and PHL will be the originating or delivering carrier on that. And that team track has been really a godsend for customers who would otherwise never have a chance to ship by rail. And our relationship with the transloaders, which addresses the first part of your question, is Pacific Harbor Line, as far as a pricing standpoint, only charges a switch fee on the tariff. That's just how the the pricing is developed, other than for special services. So regular switching is just standard rates that are absorbed by the Class 1 railroad. So the customer is not directly paying PHL for that. However, the transloading portion of it is directly handled by that shipper. So we have licensed and trained contractors that have access to our various facilities, and we are the ones that leverage the relationship. We put the customer, the shipper, in contact with the transloader, and they're able to work out their deal together. Now, whether that impacts the pricing from versus a customer who was directly rail served, I would say there are definitely times where it'll be an additional cost, but I think that the benefits far outweigh the cost of hiring a transloader. Gaining access to the rail network, whereas you previously did not have it, is a huge advantage to companies, even if their competitor somewhere else may have direct access to rail. It allows them to penetrate a market that they otherwise would have no chance of doing. Does that help answer both questions?
Yeah, but really in terms of the other value-added services, whether you're providing warehousing or some other non-switch service, that's typically added on. It's priced separately, correct?
Yes, those are all priced separately. Mm-hmm.
Josh, I'm going to come to you. Some of the early days of third-party logistics, where people would bundle things together. You remember old Sealand used to own not only a steamship line, but they had trucking companies and warehousing companies and technology companies and so forth. And one of the challenges that lots of integrated service companies have is the customer says, well, I was buying rail from you, and now I'm buying trucking from you. Now I'm buying transloading from you. How about giving me a discount? And it effectively took the margins down on some of the individual businesses and so forth through the bundling. So it may have been value added, but it was also discount encouraging. Do you feel that now? How has it changed from some of the early days of third-party logistics and integrated services?
That's a good question. At the end of the day, whatever additional services you're offering have to add some value. And if they don't, you shouldn't be offering them. And so the way we look at an opportunity, let's assume it's a new customer, maybe not as familiar with rail or transloading or the different components that go into that. We'll explore many different options. And in some cases, we have customers that say, hey, I have a good truck network for that last mile. I don't need your help there, but I really need your help on this first piece. And we'll create a service. And it may be, as you mentioned, bundled that includes both the rail and the transload, but then they handle the final delivery. Or in other cases, they say, hey, I don't have warehousing capacity. I need you not only to store, my products, my lumber, but I also need maybe some extra work done to customize some of those shipments. And so depending on what they need, we can come back with various solutions that they can choose from. Your question was around kind of, does that overall, as you bundle and as more customers take advantage of the various offerings, does that reduce the value or lower the price? And we don't typically get into pricing conversations publicly, but I would just say, in my mind, if the key component is that the market, there has to be a solution that's adding value. And if it's adding value, we're going to price to that value. And so, we're exploring a lot of different opportunities, and it's evolving. I think the supply chain is looking for new solutions, and that's changed this year versus 5 years ago. And so how do you provide those solutions that meet the needs of kind of a growing and more, I would call it a more technologically advanced supply chain, where we're getting access and we're getting exposure to some pretty efficient supply chains. When we order e-commerce and it shows up on our porch the next day, I think that's putting some good pressure on all supply chains to be more efficient and to find better solutions and take away some of that friction. We look at it as, what are the pain points? Where is it challenging for our customers? And is there a solution we can provide that will help take away that pain point? And a lot of companies have, over the years have sort of downsized some of their own internal logistics departments or supply chain departments, and they would prefer to just outsource that to someone else who has maybe more expertise or relationships in those markets. And so depending on the need, that's where we'll step in and try to provide the solution.
So safe to say you're not working from a menu and a price list. You're tailoring virtually everything. You know, I can't look up and say, well, I need warehousing in Cedar Rapids. What's UP going to charge me? It's much more of a tailored solution.
Yeah, it is. Each shipment is fairly unique. However, you're touching on what I think is a compelling idea, in that one of the things we're working on is when a customer is interested in a supply chain or shipment solution, it shouldn't take them a week to find out what that looks like. So how do we get options in front of our customers faster? And I do like that kind of a la carte kind of style of pricing. But the challenge is it may not fully address the need of the customer. So we have to balance that and make sure we're thinking about that the right way. But there are certainly opportunities to make obtaining a price, acting on that price, we can make that more efficient. And that's something that I think over time you'll see, you know, all of the supply chain get better at. But again, every shipment, I mean, they're not always 100% unique, but there are definitely nuances to every opportunity, and we want to be certain that we're addressing the needs of that specific customer.
The question comes up about almost who owns the customer. You're dealing with online customers, and you're dealing through where you are right now with a lot of offline customers that you don't connect to. How do you deal with those offline customers? How do you interface with them? Is it the delivering railroad at the other end that owns them, so to speak, or has the interface, or what is your role in that interface?
So you're absolutely right. There are customers that we directly serve, the facilities, and then they have their customers. And so that kind of becomes a balancing act. Typically, our approach is always to respect the relationship. And so if our customer wants us to get involved with their shipper, we're happy to do that. Also with the participation of UP or BNSF, who are just the PHL partners, that kind of applies across the board with Anacostia. We're very wary of making sure that the right party is communicating with the shipper. You know, if there's a question about a service that is not necessarily in our wheelhouse, we're more than happy to say, hey, we may not have the answer for you, but here are the right folks that you need to talk to. But we have been in circumstances where we've leveraged our relationship with, for example, the UP marketing team when we're struggling with a shipper who is not our direct customer. But we need them to make changes in order to help protect our facilities and our operation. Typically what we'll do is we'll rely on those partnerships to reach out to them and get involved as they kind of deem necessary.
Josh, it brings me back to a question, which is partnerships. Both of you are dealing directly with customers in most cases. How do you deal with third-party logistics companies? How do you deal with 4PLs, even the people that are and other intermediaries in the supply chain equation? How do you deal with them? And if so, how do you deal with them relative to the beneficial owner of the freight?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, in my world, much of my interaction is actually with those 3PL, IMC, broker, 4PLs. We do some with the BCO, but a lot of it's with those intermediaries. And so if you're a large automotive manufacturer and you have a trusted relationship with a 4PL and you've charged them to manage everything, right? You've said, I want you to manage my inbound parts. I want you to manage my outbound vehicles. Then we'll interface with them directly, almost like a customer. And so I have found, over my years of kind of working with those type of entities, it can work in any and all of those types of flavors, right? So if you've got a 4PL relationship, we're going to interface directly with them. Now, that doesn't mean we don't ever talk to the ultimate BCO or the ultimate customer. As needed, we're going to have those conversations when they're helpful. But from a kind of a day-to-day operations, ensuring that the freight arrives when it needs to arrive, is tracked, is processed, a lot of that will be our teams, my team, interacting directly with those intermediaries.
Camille, same question to you. Do you deal with many intermediaries, or do you go mostly direct with a customer?
So we typically go direct with the customer, but again, kind of on an as needed basis. If there are hiccups in the chain that are impacting our business and our ability to serve the customer, yeah, we'll get involved when that's, when it's deemed necessary. I think the challenge that you run into is that sometimes there are competing interests that the railroad is not necessarily privy to, nor should we be. And so it's always important to ask the right questions and make sure that the right folks are involved before the railroad steps in.
Okay. And I think I'm going to go to the last question. Again, Josh, it comes back to New Rochelle, but it's a broader issue. And it says the New Rochelle terminal was reportedly one of several projects around the country to change the footprint, potential endpoints, lanes for intermodal. Is the consolidation of large concentrated terminals like LA, Long Beach, Dallas, Chicago, Atlanta increasing? Is that part of a trend, or is there something else going on with that consolidation? Or is it just part of what you're doing with PSR and the reshaping of the network?
Yeah, so the key question is, are we meeting the needs of the market? And in some markets we haven't. So I'll give you an example. Twin Cities, we didn't have much of an intermodal footprint there. We had customers that were wanting to ship product from the West Coast into the Twin Cities area and potentially even back. And so we built what we call a pop-up intermodal ramp, which is really, it's just a smaller ramp. And it's been a great opportunity for us. And we'll continue to do those types of solutions. There's not an overarching, it has to be a major metro for us to pay attention to it. We're going to look at any market where it makes sense, where it fits in with our franchise, and where we can meet the needs of the customer. And we're continuing to look at even smaller markets where we don't have a very good solution. And if we don't have a very good solution to those markets, we need to evaluate what is the overall market size, what are the opportunities, and is it something worth investing time and energy and capital into creating? So I wouldn't read too much into any one specific change as a trend for all future changes. I think we're much more market driven in terms of what is the demand, what are the solutions, and can we create them there? And I think the Twin Cities is a perfect example where we saw a need and have gone out and started to build that. And then over time that can grow as the market needs that to grow.
I like that, a pop-up ramp, the railroad equivalent to a food truck. I think that's a good one.
That's a fair, yeah. The key is we're trying, and I think hopefully the industry sees this, we're trying to be much more responsive and nimble to changing market dynamics and supporting our customers when we need to. I think we have a history of some of those projects can take a while, right? And so how do you create a solution that's maybe not the final product, completely done, ribbon cutting ceremony, et cetera? How can you create an interim solution that helps to address that market need earlier? And that's something I think you'll see more of as we find solutions like Twin Cities.
And it's capital light. I like that.
Right.
I'll toss it back to Brett or Norm. I want to thank Camilla and Josh. Very good session. I took a lot of notes, so I learned something here. But it shows us the two bookends in terms of the short line railroads and the major class one and how they're handling this logistics resolution and keeping the railroads not only active, but key players in that. So thank you again, both of you. Norm, Brett?
Justin, you certainly did an excellent job in putting this panel together. Kima and Josh, thank you very much for your contributions to our knowledge. I must agree with Justin. I learned a lot listening to this. And I think the diversity of service offerings to your customers is really interesting to me. I come from a professional services background, as does Justin. And I think what I'm hearing is the railroads are moving more and more to being a customer or focused, almost a professional service that happens to be in the railroad industry.
Good point.
And thank you for allowing us to develop that point, and I wish each of you success. I know people in both of your railroads over the years, and both railroads have been, both Anacostia and Union Pacific have been clients of mine in my prior life. So it's very rewarding to hear you speak. Brett, before I close, is there anything you would like to add at this point?
No, I'd like to thank me and Josh as well, and Justin for putting together this session with us. Thanks for leading it today, Justin. And Norm, I'm going to hand it over to you. I know we're going to reconvene probably when the new academic year starts off back in September. But if you have any other closing notes you'd like to share, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Brett, and thank you for putting this together. And yes, we are going to reconvene in September. We're going to take a summer vacation. I guess we're still in school or something. But for those of you that are listening in, if you have any topics you would like us to consider for our agenda and presentation, we would certainly be very interested in hearing your suggestions. And with that, everyone have a great 4th of July weekend. Enjoy your summer, and we'll see you after Labor Day.
Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.